Hey everybody, I think we are now live for real. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I'm not sure if people can see me or not, but we're gonna go. Anyways, I am Derek Brown. I'm here on behalf of Long and McQuaid Musical Instruments, as well as BG and Leger Reeds. And I'm going to be talking to you today about how I do some of the stuff that I do. And let me just get back to make sure things are rolling from my end. Once again, sorry about the technical difficulties we were having. I tried to do a test run and it actually turned into the actual video. So hopefully you guys are all able to switch over and now watch this. But anyways, and Adam, if you can give me in the chat just a heads up that this is actually working, because I don't know the YouTube channel and whatnot. So I want to make sure this is actually happening and I'm not just talking into blank space. Though it'd just be like a practice. All good. Okay, sweet. Well, glad you guys are here. Hopefully, again, you made the switch. And let's just jump right in. I'm going to play a little bit, and then I will talk about kind of the evolution of my sound and how I get some of these sounds. And if any of you guys are watching, have your own saxophone, have that ready, because we'll kind of do some hands-on stuff. I know I can't see or hear you guys, but I would say about maybe a half an hour or 45 minutes into this session, this will be about a 90-minute session, you can I'll tell you guys to get your sax out, and we'll do some stuff kind of together. And I promise I'll start at a really simple level, and then we'll kind of progress from there. And I really think most of you, even if you've been playing a long time, will find something new that you maybe haven't tried before. Also, feel free to put your questions into the comments on YouTube. I am definitely taking some questions here. I've got a separate Zoom call that's getting some questions. Oh, and the level might be low. I better put my headphones on. Check, check, check. Hopefully you can hear me now. I think, yes, I was talking away from the mic. Sorry, this was a very random beginning to this because of the technical difficulty. And I think we're all good now. But don't worry, I can now hear what you hear. So I'm back. Okay. Derek Brown here, Long and McQuaid Musical Instruments. I'm going to play a little bit, and then I'll talk a little bit later. But once again, if you have questions, type them into the comments. We'll go from there. This is going to be a little bit of some improvised stuff with a little bit of the tune I call Human Error. Hey, everybody. That was a little bit of a tune I called Human Error. Once again, if you're joining me from a previous YouTube channel, sorry about the technical difficulties. But we're going to pretend those didn't happen now, and I'm just going to charge on through. I play a certain style I call BEATBoX SAX. And I wish I could tell you that I started doing that because I combined the two loves of my life, saxophone playing and beatboxing. But actually, it wasn't like that, because the truth is, if you won't tell, I'm gonna say a dirty little secret. Promise you won't tell anybody. The truth is, I don't actually beatbox. Like the boom, boom, pow. That's like all I got with vocal beatboxing. And so it's really not the same as just like, oh, I'm going to beatbox, but then play the sax. It doesn't work like that. And that's mainly because we have a mouthpiece in our mouths. And as far as I know, beatboxers don't stick the microphone, into their actual mouth. So it doesn't really translate. Some things are kind of similar, I guess. But needless to say, I'm not actually a beatboxer. And instead, how I came about this style, this sound, was actually, it's not as glamorous, but it was just a slow process of just experimenting with different ways of playing the saxophone, hearing a sound over here, trying it, hearing a sound there, not knowing what I was going to do, and gradually piecing stuff together into what now I've started to call BEATBoX SAX. And part of that's just branding, but anyways, we're going to call it that for now. So I would love to teach you everything I know about this in 90 minutes, but that's not going to happen because, well, it took me, unless you're a super fast learner, it took me only about 15 years to master this stuff. I've been playing actually much longer than that, but no, I think there are some of the techniques I use, like slap tonguing, which I'll talk about a little bit later. That's a really hard technique to learn. And it took me about a year to learn that. Now, that being said, I know some sax players, and I call them the anointed ones, or the special select from God, who, and you might know some people, or you might be one of these people if you're a sax player, who just picked up a horn, and the first time you tried tonguing, you did this. Okay, now that sounds not super great. That's not what Mary Had a Little Lamb should sound like, right? Da, da, da. But what's going on in there is I'm using like too much tongue, and my tongue is actually making a suction on the reed. It's pulling the reed down with every articulation, and it's releasing and slapping against the tip of the mouthpiece. That's what slap tonguing is. And some people do that and they don't even realize it. And it's crazy because I know professionals who have been playing decades who swear to me that they will never learn how to slap tongue, which I don't think is true. I think anybody can learn to slap tongue. I think some people are really lucky like that, and they just put a lot of tongue on the reed and just start tonguing really hard, and their tongue somehow sticks to the reed. It makes this little vacuum. But most of us, pretty much almost everyone I've taught, including myself, it takes at least months to get this process down. And like I said, at the end of this session, I'll maybe give my bits on exactly how I slap tongue and how you can practice that. But that one, I'm not expecting anyone to just master that in the course of this clinic. If you do, I'll be actually quite jealous and I'll be angry at you, and don't even tell me. I don't want to talk to you. No, just kidding. That'd be awesome. But as I'm going to say throughout this process probably multiple times, is I'm a pretty slow learner. But that's not a bad thing. And maybe in some way it's been a good thing for me, because I don't always succeed at what I want to do, and so I have to often take the mess of what I did succeed at or what I did get and turn that into something. And I think that's a lot of times what creativity is. I like how Steve Jobs defines the word creativity. He says creativity is just connecting things. And that's been true for me. It's not like I ever had like some light bulb moment where it's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do this while playing the saxophone and do this and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't go like that for me. For me, it's just a long, messy process of sitting in a practice room, and some days absolutely nothing new comes out. Some days something new comes out, but it's not good. And then maybe that 1 in 100 times something new comes out and it's like, oh, I wonder what that is. I wonder if I should pursue that. Or another big thing in my life, and this might come up a little bit in this clinic, is I love dabbling in other instruments, dabbling with other instruments, playing a little drum set, play a little guitar, learn to play piano a little bit. Not saying you have to master these things, but I really think that the more you work on any type of music, it just makes you a better sax player. It makes you a better musician in general, but it also makes you a better sax player. And especially if creativity is important to you. I think that's so true. So for me, playing the drums gave me ideas that I probably never would have had if I just had played the saxophone, and I'll get to that. Playing piano got me to, sometimes it even came from jealousy, where I'd like play the piano and be like, man, you can play all these notes so easily on the piano at the same time. I wonder if there's a way to do that in the sax. And once again, it got me to kind of think differently. And like I said, creativity, it's just connecting things. It doesn't mean you're going to like come up with some idea that no one's ever done before. No, it's going to be that you come up with an idea that someone did on piano or that you heard a singer do, and now you're applying it to the saxophone. So that's a big thing for me. And I see we have a question right now, and some of these I'll answer at the end, but I would say just shoot out your questions, and I'll kind of answer them as I go, and if I forget any, maybe Adam could remind me at the end, and I could do some of those as well. But for instance, Lee Post wrote, who do you listen to, Derek, to inspire you with this technique? So with this, my biggest influence, and I will get to this a little bit later, my biggest influence is actually not a sax player. It's actually a singer. And I don't want to totally spoil the surprise yet. So I want to jump in because the number one question is, it's how I developed this style. What inspired me to create this thing? Because, newsflash, I'm not the first person to slap tongue. I'm not the first person to double tongue. I'm not the first person to do lots of these things, most of these things, but maybe I'm the first person to do it in one certain way, just like maybe you, if you've been playing a long time, you're the first person to play in your own way because we're unique individuals and we're flawed individuals, and that, like I said, that can be a good thing. We make messes. If we did everything exactly how we wanted to, I would not be playing this way. I would be playing in a club in New York City. I'd be a jazz musician in a club in New York City, and I probably wouldn't really be out there much. I'd probably have burned out, honestly, because I'd just be playing, trying to be another John Coltrane clone or another Sonny Rollins clone, and realizing I'm never going to be as good as them or the same as them because I'm not them. I'm different. I have different abilities, different pluses, different minuses. And it turns out I've now embraced that, and that's a good thing because it made me go down this path to do this thing that I call BEATBoX SAX. So Lee, I'm gonna specifically answer your question in the course of this story. And actually, before that, as far as influences, I mean, I listen to a lot of the great saxophone masters, really the classical and jazz world. I consider myself to be kind of both. So I listened, from the classical world, I remember listening to having a couple of Eugene Rousseau CDs, a Claude DeLong CD, Otis Murphy, and then from my teachers as well. And then from the jazz world, I did a lot more listening, and I was pretty early on influenced by kind of the smooth jazz players. And then really kind of got into traditional jazz with Sonny Rollins. He was kind of my main guy for a while. And then some of the more modern dudes like Chris Potter, Joshua Redman, Michael Brecker. But none of those guys are really doing exactly this kind of thing. Some of them did solo stuff, like Chris Potter. I loved whenever he would do like an intro solo cadenza. Same thing with Sonny Rollins. Sonny Rollins actually did what might be the first ever recorded live solo saxophone concert. Once again, he's not doing the extended techniques that I'm doing. It's not in that kind of way, but it was so inspiring of like, wow, just one acoustic saxophone can like fill a stage and can entertain people and can be artful. And hold people's attention for an hour. That's really cool. That was the thing I was kind of jealous of piano players, because that seems much easier on that. But so that was a big influence for me. But as I mentioned, now let me kind of get into the story. So I kind of had a normal musical upbringing. I went to a small town, high school, Lakeview High School, pretty small band program. Realized, I like doing this music thing. Maybe I could major in college in this. And I went to a small school, Hope College. Small schools were good for me because they gave me a chance to I felt like I could experiment in everything. There weren't so many students that you had to just pick your one thing. I could be in the sax quartet. I could be in the top jazz ensemble by my junior year. I could get some solos in that. I could be in the combos, and I could work my way up to the top one because it's a small school. So I got to, eventually got to get more attention from the teachers. That was really good for me. And I majored in classical music and jazz performance, kind of classical first, then performance. I had no idea what I was doing. Once again, I said if I had a goal, I would have dreamt that I would be in just playing traditional jazz in a combo in New York City. And anyways, I went to then grad school right after that. I went to the University of Cincinnati, College Conservatory of Music. And it was there that I had a very difficult time in music that actually turned out to be a really good thing for me. And I think this is the theme of my life. We could talk about the pandemic times, which I'm not going to right now, but I've had a lot of difficult moments during this. I'm sure a lot of you have too. And hopefully it's led to some changes for the good. That'll be determined by the long run, but we'll see. Anyways, at Cincinnati, I was supposed to be one of the top dogs. I was a grad assistant, so I was paid to go to school. And to do that, I had to kind of teach some courses. And once again, I'm supposed to be one of the top sax students that's there. And I was in charge of a beginning jazz combo. And I was supposed to be the coach, teach them everything I know. And the first day that this combo met, there was this young sax player by the name of Jack Finucane. Those of you in the sax world might know this name. He actually runs a shop out in Boston, Boston Sax Shop. Anyways, he came in. He was 6 years younger than me, and he started playing, and it was my gosh, this kid is twice as good as me. Why am I playing the saxophone? Who am I kidding? This kid's twice as good as me. And here I am trying to make it as just a really good sax player, and someone half my age is already better than me. I thought I practiced a lot. I thought I was pretty good. And maybe some of you have had these moments where, and we hate the competition side of music, but it's there sometimes, and we can't help comparing ourselves. But anyways, I just kind of had this moment where it was like a midlife crisis, kind of burnt out. Why am I even playing this instrument if I practice so hard to be a certain way and I'm not even close to being the best? And that was when I realized if I'm not the best in this room in Cincinnati, I'm certainly not the best in the whole school. I'm not the best in the city. I'm not even close to being, in the Midwest. And then I realized, you know what? There are probably thousands and thousands of sax players that are better than me at like straight ahead jazz or at classical music. People that are also, I was trying to be like Sonny Rollins, and I realized there are thousands of other people that are also trying to be like Sonny Rollins. And there's always going to be people that practice probably way more than me, even though I was practicing 5-6 hours a day when I got to college. And so that was discouraging. And I was like, why am I even playing this thing? Because as I imagined, and it's true, there are so many good players out there. If you want to be heard, you have to be the absolute best at what you do. And there are thousands of players that are so amazing. So I didn't know what to do. I kept playing, practicing. I kept my ears open. But it wasn't until I was out of school and I had a teaching gig down in Texas that when I finally felt free, I was away from the pressures of like competing against actual sax players. And I remember kind of looking at the horn and I'm thinking, I have a day job. I don't have to play this saxophone. And so instead, if I am going to play this, when I do pick it up, I'm going to play it exactly how I want to. I'm not going to try to be somebody else unless I want to. I'm not going to try to do just what I'm supposed to do because someone said so. Now, I can talk about that. And a lot of times, those things that teachers tell you, they're really important things. And you'll often come back to those and realize, oh, they were right. And there are certain things like that for sure. But in general, I want to play the music that I want to listen to and I want to play. And so I remembered back when I was in college hearing certain sounds on the saxophone that I experimented with, but I didn't know what to do. And I remember being like, I want to focus on some of those things. And that was some of these things that we now call extended techniques. And I'm going to get now into some musical stuff. Once again, if you're watching this, if you are a sax player, of course, this will be right up your alley. Even if you're not a sax player, I hope there's going to be some things that I'll say or even play on the saxophone that might inspire you to play your horn a little bit different or to experiment in a different way. Like I said, that was huge for me. Playing other instruments, watching other instruments, being jealous of other instruments sometimes led to me wanting to experiment a little bit differently on my horn. Most of the experiment led to just garbage, but some of it was like, hey, this could be really cool. I should pursue this. So the first sound that I heard, I remember going to a free jazz concert. And I don't mean free as in like this clinic is free. I mean free as in avant-garde, out there stuff. And I remember hearing a sax player that played something like this. That was note for note what they played. This was 20 years ago, and I heard that. No, just kidding. And I'll admit, I'm not the biggest fan of avant-garde free jazz. I couldn't listen to that for 3 hours as that concert probably lasted. I am a firm believer, however, that we can learn from pretty much any type of music, or even probably any musical experience that we had. Just like I think you can learn from any experimenting you do with other instruments. It makes you a better musician. So I remember hearing a lot of weird stuff that I did not like, but I remember also hearing a couple of sounds that I was like, what was that? That was a saxophone that did that? And I remember particularly being drawn to that percussive sound, that, and being like, what? A saxophone can kind of make like a drum sound? He's not hitting anything, but there's like no pitch. It kind of sounds like a drum. And so I remember then going home and getting my sax out and like, how did he do that sound? I remember hearing some other sax players like Jeff Coffin did it with the Bela Fleck and the Flecktones. And just kind of watching what their mouth was doing on videos. And I finally learned how to do that sound. And we're going to talk about that sound. And this is a sound that compared to slap tonguing, it's actually extremely easy. Like anybody could get this, I guarantee, like down within a few hours of practicing it. And it's cool because other instruments can even get a sound like this. Trumpets, trombones, I've heard, can get a sound like this. And so I'm actually just going pa, pa. I'm actually not using my tongue at all. I'm not getting the suction like a slap tongue. I will talk about that in the second half of this clinic, so stay tuned for that. Well, all I have to say is I heard that percussive sound and I was like, whoa, that's cool. And to me, I remember immediately thinking like, okay, I wasn't really into that free jazz stuff using it like a sound effect. I was thinking like, that sounds like a snare drum. And I'd played drum set before. And I just thought about the music I really liked listening to. And a lot of times it has a snare drum on beats 2 and 4. And I'm particularly thinking of like pop music, like the music you hear on the radio, which I'll be honest, I grew up listening to a lot of like kind of 80s, 90s pop music, contemporary Christian music, if anyone's heard of like DC Talk, Audio Adrenaline, but also some kind of classic 80s stuff that a lot of stuff that you might think is cheesy nowadays. But it didn't matter. That stuff is like staying with me forever. People say, there's like studies done that say the music you listen to when you're a teenager, it will last your lifetime. Like you will never get tired of it because I think it's because there's a nostalgia with it. Music is so tied with memory. And the music you listen to, you know, at your first dance, on your first date, that is emotional stuff. That's big stuff is happening in your life, and that's going to stay with you, whether you think it's cheesy or not. So you might as well embrace it. You know, if you were listening to One Direction when you were a teenager, they're coming with you no matter what you do. I'm not talking Harry Styles. I'm talking One Direction. So anyways, I didn't learn to actually embrace that until I was out of college when I realized, you know what, who cares about being cool or not? This is what I like. So anyways, I realized I wanted to use that sound, that backbeat pop as like a backbeat on a pop song. You know, others might have used it as a color thing, or maybe thinking of like a more jazz setup. Anyways, I wanted to do a backbeat, pop beat on 2 and 4. And so I started to experiment with like, what if I play regular notes on beats 1 and 3 and then pops on 2 and 4? And we're going to do some of this later on at the later half of this. So I started to improvise. And it's really important to say it didn't sound like that at the beginning. You know, it was probably like, you know, just doing like a scale in the pop and gradually expanding on that. We'll talk about that more. We'll do that more when we experiment, when you guys have your horns out. And so anyways, I had no idea what to do with that. Like I said about being creative, most of the stuff, you don't really know what to do. It's not like a lightning bolt and your life has changed. I wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm now going to change the world and do beatbox. I'll call it BEATBoX SAX. I'll do solo concerts. You know, I'll go all over and do clinics all over. No, that was far from my mind. I mean, maybe dreaming, but I was just like, this is a cool sound. I'm just going to experiment with it. And so hopefully, especially if some of you learn some of these new sounds from this clinic, you go back to your band, you annoy the heck out of your band director, but hopefully you don't just stop there. It's like, maybe I could write something with this. Maybe I could put this with something else. Maybe I could play with some other instruments and we could do a jam together. You know, maybe I could write a tune. For any band directors watching this, I have to say, I remember doing a clinic in Wisconsin at a small school. It was for like a middle school, high school, and I taught the kids how to do that sound. And the next day, the band director who brought me in, he sent me a text, and it was a video text, and I kind of knew where this was going. And I opened the video text, and it was like a group of students sitting there and just going pop 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 in the saxophone section, and then he wrote one word, thanks, period. Okay, and so I was like, yeah, I know, I'm probably annoying band directors everywhere. But then he sent another text that said, but do you know what? These kids actually took their instruments home and practiced this. They actually practiced this overnight. And I guess, you know, that was like an unusual thing. And then the next day, he sent me a video text of one of his students who had written a song using that pop thing. Kind of like, you know, something really simple, but it was actually something they wrote. And I can tell you, when I was in middle school, I wasn't writing anything for music, whether I write it down or not. I just didn't do that. So, hey, if some of this stuff can inspire you or your students to just get excited about the saxophone in a different way, or your instrument, that's great. It might lead to some awkward moments, or like inappropriate moments, in the sense of like a sax player using it and it doesn't fit the style at all. And that's one of those things where it's like, I'm a parent now of a 2-year-old and a 2-month-old. And it's one of those things where it's like, half of you wants to tell them and say like, stop, that's really bad. But then half of you is like, yeah, man, go for it. You just did something new. And of course, it's a growing thing. If they stay there their whole life and are always kind of ruining a Bach piece by doing that, maybe that's one thing. But hopefully, this is all inspiring us to try different stuff. I know that stuff was good for me to hear. So, on to the next sound. So, it was later on, and now this is like in grad school, that I remember hearing, now from a completely different genre, not from free jazz, this time from classical music, from contemporary classical music. I remember hearing a sound that sounded like this. And once again, my ears were like, what is that? That's a saxophone? Are you kidding me? Like, that is so cool sounding. And those of you watching who have heard something similar, you might know that is what we call slap tonguing. And there's a couple of ways of slap tonguing. There's closed slap tonguing, where my embouchure is closed around the mouthpiece. And then open slap, which sounds a lot like those pops. And once again, I can talk about the end if we have time. But this is the technique that took me a long time to learn. Once again, I was in grad school, so I'd been playing sax for many years. It took me about a year of like giving up, starting over, probably longer than a year. I'd say a year of like actually sitting down and working on it, but probably a couple of years before that of like starting, giving up, thinking it's not possible, restarting, all that stuff. It's a tough technique. But it was another sound I heard, and it was like, I have to learn to do that. That is so cool. And to me, it reminded me of a bass player, like an electric bass player slapping the strings, going ba-down, bow, ba-down, bow. It even has that word slap in it. So it had this bassy sound. Now, a lot of people probably wouldn't first associate it with that. But once again, me with the music I grew up listening to, this kind of like quote-unquote cheesy pop music or funk music, I'm listening to a lot of that stuff. And so it's just me connecting that, just thinking like, oh, I want to kind of make like a bass slap sound like that. Maybe I can do that on the sax. And so then I started doing that. And I remember thinking, oh, I have this bass slap sound. I have this percussion sound. Maybe I can kind of mix the two together and do this like kind of rhythm section thing. And, from there, once again, it wasn't like, whoa, this is going to be a new thing for me. I was getting closer, but I wasn't still seeing the possibility of doing like solo saxophone and actually making a career of that. No way I would not have thought that was possible. One, it would have been too tiring. Two, I just wouldn't have thought you could do enough different stuff to keep it interesting. And I see Gary Martin asked, how do you get rid of the pitch in that first sound? I will talk a little bit about this then, the slap tonguing. So, as I mentioned at the very beginning, slap tonguing, and Gary, I don't know if you know, I guess you know how to do a slap, and you probably know how to do an open slap. And you're wondering how to go from to, or no, it looks like you want to know the other way. You want to get rid of the pitch. So, maybe you're able to do a closed slap, and now you want to go instead. So, one, you can do the pops, which I'll talk about in detail. But, like I said, there's two types of slap tonguing. So, first of all, and I'll just give my kind of 50 cents on this right now. Slap tonguing this is the reed. this is my tongue. You have to be able to make a vacuum with your tongue, which sounds really weird and hard, and it is really weird and hard. You have to be able to make a vacuum, kind of like a suction cup shape with your tongue, and you pull down the reed with that by making that vacuum like a suction cup. And when you release, the reed slaps against the top of the mouthpiece, and that's what you're actually hearing is that. I mean, that's kind of reverberating through the horn, is that slap of the reed violently hitting the mouthpiece. And to do that, one, just for people who aren't able to slap tongue yet, one is a helpful thing. If you're able to do this, this is a helpful start. If you can kind of curve up the size of your tongue, that is helpful. However, you don't have to be able to do that. And it's a little more than that because that's not making a true plunger. To make a true plunger, you also have to do the front and back of the tongue. One way I like to think about it is the shape of your teeth. It makes like a semicircle, right? It's rounded. And so one way I like to think about making this plunger shape is widen your tongue over your teeth and then sink it down into the teeth and feel how your tongue kind of makes a natural bowl shape coming from the teeth. So if I go, and particularly push with your finger and do that. And you're going to notice your tongue kind of wraps around your finger. And what you need to do is not just do that from pushing it down, but you need to be able to learn to do that on its own. And for that tongue to kind of almost like grab onto that finger. And the tricky thing is you have to do that at such a small level where you don't need much reed. And I would suggest if anyone's working on this for the first time or having trouble, the bigger the reeds, the easier it is. So I would suggest using a bari sax reed at first, just to see if you can get suction on it. Even if you don't play bari, you can do this on soprano. You could learn it on soprano or alto or anything in between. But borrow a reed from a friend. And so, for instance, I have this Leger reed here, right here. And a lot of people ask me, like, do you have to do this on a Leger? You don't have to do it on a Leger reed. However, I just love these reeds. I notice my tongue is scraping a lot on the reed, and I don't get slivers because this isn't cane. So that's a plus. But then I could talk all day about the benefits of Leger reeds, how you don't have to wet them. Like before this stream, I didn't have to like soak on the reed forever. It was just there. It's ready to go. I could be talking for half an hour and then just pick it up and it plays. It's pretty sweet. Also, the climate doesn't change it, and then they're just the same from one to the other. The other thing is they just last a long time. So check these reeds out. And so maybe pick up a bari sax reed and just put it on your tongue and try to think about that shape, about closing your tongue in kind of around, making a vacuum. And you're going to place it on the tongue and just pick it up and see if, and think about making that vacuum suction and see if you can just like get it to stick to the reed. And you can kind of hear it. And I'll show you up close. You won't hear it as much, but here's what it looks like. And if this was done live, which is a little extra gross because I know it's weird just seeing the tongue do that. A cool thing about these Leger reeds is you can actually see through the reed, and so you can actually see my tongue kind of making a little air pocket there. And by the way, since I'm talking about this stuff, you might be curious. I'm also playing on a Jody Jazz mouthpiece. You can use any mouthpiece. Smaller tip openings are helpful. I have this one called, it's kind of like a signature one, Jody Jazz DV, because it has a smaller tip opening, but has kind of a more pop sound. And then I'm also using this BG Duo Series ligature, and this thing is awesome. I love this thing. I use the rose gold version. I'll be honest, I haven't experimented with the different metal versions, like the gold, silver plated. I just know it just works really well, holds the reed really nicely. And once again, I'm pretty violent on my reeds, so I've never had a problem of this ligature letting it go. I use a soprano Duo Series ligature for my tenor metal mouthpiece. That's just an important sizing thing. The metal mouthpieces are thinner, and so you want to use a thinner ligature. And the sweet thing about these Duo ligatures is they have a lot. They can fit a lot of mouthpieces. I even use my bari sax metal mouthpiece with the same soprano ligature. It works on so many good sizes, and that's the mark of a good ligature. It fits a lot of mouthpieces and just really holds that reed on nicely and has a great sound. So back to this the whole idea of slap tonguing. So if you can do that, And just like 5 minutes every day, just practice. See if you can get that suction on there. And then that one day when it happens, when you can get it, because you won't get it at all until you do. You get it, just, man, be like, oh my gosh, how did I do that? Show your friends, show your parents. Look, oh, wow. Look, show random neighbors on the street. They'll be freaked out, but you can be pumped. Now, that's the first step. Then you put the reed onto your ligature, onto your mouthpiece. See if you can do the same thing. And you can put your teeth on the mouthpiece. You're going to be using a lot of tongue at first, because to get that suction, it's going to be weird, almost impossible to just make it really small as it needs to be. And that's where then the weeks and maybe months or maybe a year of practicing, as you just learn to use less and less tongue and get a stronger and stronger suction. Now, the question that Gary asked, he said, how do you get rid of the pitch in that first sound? I often find the easier version to do is the open slap, but apparently, Gary, you are able to do the closed slap. So what he's talking about is if you have your normal embouchure and you're biting down and getting that sound, you get the pitch. Now, I find to get that good pitch, I actually want to bite a little bit harder, and this is why I like a more closed tip mouthpiece. I bite harder because I want to close off the reed to the mouthpiece so it's actually touching the tip, so that when I pull back the reed and let go, it slaps against the mouthpiece. Otherwise, it'll just kind of like move in thin air and you don't get a nice pop. You get this kind of sound. A lot of people working on slap tongue get that sound. And so I have to tell them, it feels wrong, because it normally is wrong. You actually have to bite down on that mouthpiece and reed, just as if you were doing a really strong, vibrato. But bite down, way down, and then do the slap, and you'll get that nice sound. Here's what happens as I gradually bite more. And then there's biting less. Now, as Gary asked, how do you get rid of that pitch? If you want that pitchless, really nice kind of whip crack sound, all I'm doing is, as I do the slap, I'm dropping my jaw and opening my mouth. It might seem weird kind of getting the timing right. The big thing to know is it's not so much about the air and like going, foo, foo. Air is not important. It's more about getting a strong suction and then timing it with that drop of the jaw. But maybe just don't even bite very hard to begin with, and then you get that kind of purely percussive sound. Now, that being said, the tone does change. But listen, there's not much of a pitch during that C sharp, open fingering. So that's kind of what I prefer there. Hope that answered your question, Gary. So experiment with that for a little bit, and you'll get there. Now, okay. There was my little bit on slap tonguing. That's as far as I'm going to go today, because there's a lot you can talk about with that, and it's mostly just trial and error. It's so hard to know exactly what you're doing with your tongue in your mouth. You just have to try it for your own. And just be encouraged by the fact, or discouraged, be encouraged by the fact that it took me forever. I'm a slow learner. It probably won't take you nearly as long, especially if you have a little guidance. Like, I didn't have someone tell me about the whole, like, you want to bite a little bit harder when doing it. Check out a bunch of YouTube videos online. There's a bunch of people talking about it. So that's slap tonguing. Now, that being said, so back to my story of the evolution of hey, Cindy Babcock said, hey, I can do it. LOL. You just picked it up. Okay, that makes me very angry, Cindy. Go away. That's not fair. I want that year back in my life. No, just kidding. Congrats. That's awesome. And once again, like I said, sometimes people, you try that way with the reed, and then sometimes people just... They're just putting a lot of tongue and just pulling it off while tonguing hard, and they get that sound, and it's so unfair, but good for them. That's awesome. Okay, so back to my story. So I learned how to do the slap tongue. I liked the bass sound, and I had this pop sound. Or you could do an open slap, and I'll talk more about that later once again. But I didn't know what to do with it. It didn't really fit into traditional jazz. I couldn't really make it work until I heard my biggest influence of all time for this style, which is getting finally back to Lee Post's question, which, wow, that was like this is the world's longest answer to this question. You had no idea you were going to get all this, Lee. But my biggest inspiration, I gave you guys a hint that it was a vocalist. It is, in fact, the great Bobby McFerrin, who, if you don't know, turn off this YouTube. Go look up Bobby McFerrin right now. Go look up Bobby McFerrin solo and just spend the next like 5 hours just watching that. And then you can always come back and watch. No, you can stick around and watch this, I guess. But he is amazing and kind of cross any genre. Everybody loves this guy. He has a pop hit, Don't Worry, Be Happy. You may have heard of it. You may be sick of it. You may have that little Billy Bob Bass singing Fish. But I don't think he would say that is his greatest achievement. He is just one of the most creative musicians I or most people have seen. And he will do these solo concerts, and this is something I've mimicked my shows after, where it's just him and a microphone on stage, acoustic, no looping. Looping's cool, but he doesn't need to use it, and I kind of prefer to try not using it. And you'll hear him sing, and then you hear this full sound, and it's like, I'm hearing melodies, I'm hearing bass, I'm hearing percussion. What is he doing? And so when I just really sat down and studied, I realized he was kind of often doing three things. One, he's kind of doing this percussive thing going on. He's often beating his chest, or he's doing a little percussive finger stuff on the microphone. So that's one element, percussion. Two is he's often singing these bass lines in this deep voice. And number three is what really got me, because this was the missing link. How could someone do melody on a monophonic instrument? Monophonic meaning mono, one, phonic sound. One sound. A voice only can make one sound, unless you're a Tuvan throat singer, and we're not going to get into that. Saxophone, unless you're talking about multiphonics, which is even technically it's one sound going back and forth very fast. That's this. You can hear multiple sounds in there, but it's not technically at the same time, and it sounds really gross. But you can only do one note on the saxophone, which is kind of disappointing. But Bobby realized with his voice, if he sang in between those low notes, in the gaps, he could make it sound like there's a melody. And he didn't just sing like right around the same pitches. He realized, what if he sings like in a high falsetto voice? Now, why does he do that? He wants to kind of make it sound like it's a different instrument. Like there's a low bass singer and there's a high soprano. And that's really difficult to jump back and forth. But that's the secret to what he does. And just practicing it is the secret. And so once again, so it's like he's got this percussion, bass, and then alternating with the melody. Terrible example, but you hopefully get the point. Now, I remember being like, man, he can do that on the voice. I wonder if I could do that on the sax. And I remember taking the tune, a jazz blues tune called Tenor Madness, and seeing if I could do melody, bass, percussion. So I started with the melody, which is what we normally would do on the sax. Now, that's all we would normally do. We would solo a little bit. Well, we just play the melody, which is cool. Hopefully in your head you're hearing bass line, you're hearing the beat. But other people might not be hearing that. Or maybe you want to hear that or play. I always did. I wasn't satisfied with just playing melodies. So I remember thinking, okay, I have these tools, these other techniques. I wonder if I could put those in. So now I want to try to do the melody and then that percussion on 2 and 4. So So there's a little bit of a beat there on 2 and 4. And now I wanted to see, okay, now I have this slap tonguing thing. Maybe I can like slap out bass notes on the downbeats of each beat. And I picked this tune because it's very syncopated. Because obviously, like I said, I can't do 2 notes at the same time. I can't do a melody note and a bass note at the same time, but I could do one right after the other and make it hopefully be so quick that it seems seamless. So I worked on that, and it sounds like this. Now, once again, this is really important for me to say this. This might be the most important thing you hear that I say, because it was the most important thing for my career. In fact, it's my superpower. My superpower isn't doing what I just did, or if I want to go more advanced and like get my thumb playing, I scrape the back of the saxophone on the thumb hook, doing different rhythms. I'll play on the bass. I'll do kick drums with my feet. Or because, okay, someone might say, wow, Derek, we could never do that. We're just mortal. People will say that, something like that. And the truth is, okay, here's something that sounds really arrogant, but I'll tell you how it's actually the opposite of arrogance. What I just played there, like what I just played there is extremely easy for me to play. Now, that sounds arrogant, right? Who would say that? Something really technical sounding, it's so easy for him. It is extremely easy. And here's the deal. It has to be extremely easy. You want to know what I'm thinking when I'm playing that? Like, someone might be thinking like, man, first of all, wow, is he like dividing his brain into 4 parts, and he's thinking of the high notes, the melody notes, he's thinking of the bass notes, he's thinking of that mouth percussion, he's thinking of the rhythm he's doing on his ring, he's thinking of the stomp. What in the world? Here's what I'm thinking. When I'm playing that, like just now, I was looking at the screen instead of the camera, and I was like, oh, I should be looking at the camera. My stomp box is kind of slipping away. Does this sound okay? Is anyone watching this on YouTube? That's what I was thinking when I was just playing that. I wish I was thinking more musically, but I wasn't thinking like D after quarter 16th note, 8th trill. No. I was just thinking of those things. Why? Does that mean music is like flowing from my fingertips? Creativity is just flowing and I don't even have to think. No, what that means is I had to work on this stuff so slowly for such an embarrassingly long amount of time, like months, well, really years, these techniques, that there's no way I couldn't play it. Like, it's complete muscle memory, 100%. I'm not thinking of anything. I could play that in my sleep if I could, like, just do it. A baby could play what I'm playing if they had big enough hands. Anybody watching this could play exactly what I played if you had worked on the same things I worked on. It's that simple. And the truth is, you'd probably have learned it way quicker. And I've been playing that song a long time. I should be doing other new stuff I'm working on, but I'm afraid because it's scary for me playing something for the first time. When it's not total muscle memory, it is a disaster until it becomes. And so I worked on this stuff, like I said, so slow for such a long time. That is my superpower. My superpower is just the ability to sit in a practice room and just work on this stuff hour after hour, day after day, until I get it. And it doesn't matter. The good news is it doesn't matter how long it takes you, as long as you just keep going with it. And life is short, as we say, but it's also long. And there's a lot of time in the day, and there's a lot of time in life. And you don't have to master this stuff right away. I certainly didn't. I'm 37, and I probably started playing this way when I was 30. It took me that long, and I started when I was 12. Like I said, so many of you, and I've heard middle schooler, high schoolers that can play some of this stuff before I was even dreaming about it. And so I just want to encourage you with that's all that it takes. I am doing nothing special up here. So much so that you might be like, why are we even watching this guy? And that's a good point. I learned this stuff so slow, but I just stubbornly stuck with it because it was like I saw something there. I heard something that I just was passionate about, and I would really wanted to play in this certain way and just challenge myself to do it day after day. And finally, it started taking shape, and here it is. And so I hope that you guys, whatever your kind of goals are, whatever you want to sound like, don't get discouraged that it's tough, because it is tough. Learning an instrument, it's not like a video game where you can really get a hang of a video game within the first time you're playing it. It's super tough, but man, it's super rewarding to notice yourself getting better. And some of you who have maybe been playing a lot of like maybe straight ahead jazz or pop or classical, I love doing these extended techniques, working on things like double tonguing, triple tonguing, because for me, it's a way to kind of keep new things coming into my life. If I only keep working on trying to improvise better, I sometimes lose motivation because I'm like, man, I've been working on this stuff so long. Am I better than I was last year, even 5 years ago? I don't know. When you've kind of gotten to the point of mastery on an instrument, it's tough to notice your progress because you've gotten to a certain level where when you get better, it's microscopic amounts. But when you're learning something for the first time, so this is those of you in middle school learning a band instrument, like that is such a fun time to be a musician. When you first made that sound on the flute and it's like, oh my gosh, Mom, listen, I can make a sound. And then the first time you played Mary Had a Little Lamb on the trumpet, it was so hard, but like, man, so rewarding. And then you notice like, wow, I'm twice as good as I was yesterday. And then a week goes by, I'm twice as good as I was last week. And then a few weeks, I'm twice as good as I was then. And then slowly, yeah, you keep getting better, but it's tougher to notice the progress unless you keep working on new things. And yes, hopefully we're working on those fundamentals that are always like, you can always do long tones and scales, and you can never run out of things to do. For instance, just today and yesterday, I was doing a lot of long tones. I was having to remind myself to blow from the diaphragm again. One of those things that my teachers told me I needed to do, and I like didn't listen. And pretty much every day I need to do at least a few long tones to remind myself of breathing correctly from the diaphragm, because we flawed humans often try to breathe short, shallow breaths from our lungs, and that's not good long term. Health-wise. Maybe it's fine for like a month or a year or so, but eventually you're going to have to stop playing unless you can do it right. So that's an important thing. Keep being healthy while doing this. All that to say is a key thing for my life and my music, and I hope some of you guys have this, I always just want to keep things challenging and fun. I have to. Otherwise, why do it? I will lose interest. I always have to be looking for new projects to work on, something that's not quite like I did before, a new skill like writing for an orchestra, writing for a big band like I did for my last album, doing something with a duo, doing more improv, writing lyrics with songs. These are all challenges that I've been afraid of, but man, it's made it so much more rewarding and so much, it just makes me want to practice, get up and practice. And then it doesn't matter how long it takes because it's fun noticing that you're learning. And then along with that, keeping things fun. Don't forget why you got into music in the first place. If this becomes your gig, like your job, like it is for me, it can be really easy to just get in a rut and just do the same thing because that's just what you know. Make sure it's fun. And so it's similar to the challenge. Stretch yourself. Play with some other musicians that you have. Meet some other musicians. Go to a jam session. Learn to improvise if you haven't. Learn to play another instrument if you haven't. Play a different genre of music. Join a pop band, a rock band. Have fun with it, and it's going to make you a better classical saxophonist. It's going to make you a better jazz saxophonist. It's going to make you a better musician, and it's going to keep you motivated. And if you can do those things, if you can keep it fun, keep it challenging, and stay healthy doing it, doing those good technique things, you can sustain it as long as you need to, and you can make it as a musician if that's your goal. You can get out there and you can do it. You can have success. I guarantee it if you can just sustain it. The biggest problem most people have, even the best players, is that they lose motivation. They have a hard time making ends meet. They get bored. They're done. That happens to so many musicians. And if you just can keep having fun, keep challenging yourself outside of school, it's easy to be challenged and have fun with it when you have your classmates, your teachers giving you awesome assignments, private lessons. But when you're done with that, when you are out in the real world, you got to do that stuff your own. You got to find ways to perform. It's been tough during the pandemic because there haven't been the normal avenues to perform. And so we've had to get creative, like doing concerts on Zoom. For instance, tomorrow or Wednesday, I'm going to be doing a thing where I'm playing live in an old kind of just an old church. I'm going to be improvising for an hour and streaming just because I want to, one, I want to help raise money for this building, but two, I just want to work on just being able to improvise live. And I want the experience of like playing in a cool space and playing for other people, even if I know it just means that they're somewhere on the internet. We have to find ways of keeping it fun, keeping it challenging. And if you do, the sky's the limit. Doesn't matter how slow you go. You can accomplish anything eventually. So that's so important as I talk about all these techniques. It's so important to just realize that it doesn't matter how fast. Have fun with it. Who knows where it's going to go? It doesn't matter. Have fun with it. Let me answer this question, and then I'll get back to my story. Bruno Casa asked, "Dream to play sax. I'm a guitar player. What are your tips for me to start playing sax?" Oh, cool. Hey, we've got a convert, everybody. No. Man, guitar, I often am like, man, I should switch to guitar. And I have a guitar and I play a little bit. Tips for playing sax. First of all, there's a lot of great YouTube lessons out there, which in the past you couldn't have said that. Like, you have to get a teacher. Number two, if you can find somebody like a private lesson teacher or a friend, wow, it really helps getting that instant feedback when you're starting, because online can only do so much. Online can't look at you right now and say, you're using too much lip, blah, 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 especially at the beginning. So Bruno, especially at the beginning, maybe depending on your funds, if you can get weekly lessons, that's ideal, and do that as long as you can. If not, get a couple lessons at the beginning to get you started, and then you can do the YouTube route and learn so much. Get a sax, whatever you can get a hold of. I play a P. Moriat sax, and they have great beginner horns. You probably don't need a professional horn, but most saxophone brands also have a kind of a student model. That's what you'd look for. So check those out. Maybe your local store has some used stuff or not. But yeah, there's tons of places to get saxes. Visit a Long and McQuaid shop for sure and see and talk to the dealers. I mean, one of these brick and mortar stores like L&M, I mean, are so nice because you can just go there, and even if they don't have something, you can talk to an actual musician. So check that out. Talk to someone. They'll get you set up with the right gear you need. Basically, you need a saxophone, a mouthpiece, a reed, and a ligature. Don't forget to try those Leger reeds and BG ligatures. BG also makes a lot of great like cleaning supplies and whatnot, and so you want to do that so it lasts a long time. It's a different beast than a guitar, and it's especially coming from guitar, just the whole idea of like blowing into the instrument. Take your time with that. Learn to breathe correctly and blow from your diaphragm. That's going to take you a long way. But in some ways, I think the saxophone is actually a lot easier than a guitar. I think it's like probably the easiest wind instrument that's out there. You just press a button and your finger's always on the same button compared to a guitar where you're moving around. This is always a B, and that one finger only does that one key. I guess it technically can do this F sharp or this high F key, but it's really simple that way, and it'll just take some coordination, but it doesn't matter. Just like the first time you learn to do, your G chord, C chord, and D chord, it'll be a little awkward at first, but it'll pretty soon become intuitive if you just do it a little bit every day. That's the key thing. I'm actually learning to play cello and violin a little bit, mostly cello, and it's just been a new project to keep things interesting. And yeah, I was terrible at the beginning. That'd be kind of like the equivalent, the opposite of you going from guitar, stringed instrument to a horn. And yeah, it was super weird for me and using a bow, but like just doing a little bit every day. And it's just like, hey, wow, I'm twice as good as I was yesterday. I'm twice as good as I was 2 weeks ago. I'm twice as, and that's just super fun for me to notice that. So good question. Good luck, Bruno. All right. So back to the various techniques. And then I want everybody who has their instrument, we're going to get that out. If you have a sax, and we're going to try some of these things. I see I have 22 minutes. So we're going to do that. But back to my story. When I heard Bobby McFerrin, that was when the floodgates opened, and it was like I could finally see a little bit. I could dream of like maybe a direction I could imagine going, and it was so exciting. And it didn't matter if it was going to be like lucrative as a career choice. It was just, I just wanted to do this. It was fun and challenging, definitely challenging. And so once again, when I learned you can do melody, bass, and percussion, and I realized, oh, I could do this with like pop songs. It's like, and wow, that was kind of a bad version of that. But I realized, oh yeah, I could kind of alternate melody with bass line. I realized I could write some stuff. I realized from watching guitar players that when they like hit their instrument, you know, this finger style, I realized, oh, I wonder if there's a way I could hit my instrument. Now, some of you might be band teachers and parents might be freaking out like, I don't want them. These are invaluable instruments, and it's true. The truth of the matter is I'm actually just hitting my thumb hook right here, which you can see it's very short. I have actually filed it shorter, and that's because I do this like up and down thing. But just the normal hook, I'm actually just hitting that. So I'm not actually scratching the saxophone body. So let's see if you can see. And so that's what's getting kind of some extra percussion there. Once again, with like everything else, that did not come natural to me. And I want you to make sure everybody knows that. It's not like, he's fingering notes here and doing a rhythm here? I had to start so slow. I had to start, doing whole notes. And then, 2 weeks of that. And then different rhythms. And so, like anything else, it took a long, long time, but it was super fun to work on. And you could always change your thumb hook. I know the repair people watching this are going to be like, oh my gosh. But hey, it's more money for you if they break the instrument. But really, I've never had a problem with damaging the instrument because I'm just hitting the thumb hook. Another thing, like I mentioned, I'm doing some stomping. You can't see my legs here, but I have kind of a kickbox down here. And that was from playing drum set. And I realized, hey, drummers get to use all of their appendages. They use their arms and they use their feet in this really kind of creative way. And so it's like, maybe I could just get like a kick drum sound by just stomping on the floor on the stage. And so that's this. Or, in different rhythms like this other tune that I did. I think you can hear that. So that's just stomping. Once again, it was another coordination thing I had to work out that didn't come natural. But over the years, it's become much more easier. Then I realized, playing a little bit of piano, watching piano players, guitar, getting jealous of singers who would play on their instrument and being like, man, I wish I could sing sometimes and play in saxophone. I played in a punk rock band in high school. I was guitar and singer. But when I got serious about the sax, it's like the singing went away until I realized, you know what, I'm kind of alternating melodies and bass lines. I wonder if I could do that with my voice, kind of in and out of the sax. And so that was when I started experimenting with like doing pop songs. And if you've seen it, my most popular YouTube video is Stand By Me. And so I'm like going, when the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only, and so forth. And so that was kind of fun when I realized, I can kind of go in and out of the sax with my mouth and do that. Another thing I realized, like something like chopsticks, dun 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 dun. Easiest song in the world to play on the piano if you have two fingers. Like I said on the sax, we can only play one note at a time. But I realized with this slap tonguing technique, I could make a slap so strong that I didn't need to use really much air to power it. And I actually realized I could open my mouth while doing it. And so I could actually kind of sing a note pretty clearly while doing that. So like, I don't know how well you can hear this. You can play chopsticks on the sax. And that went into like not sure how much the mics are picking up that, but you can get little mini 2-note chords, dyads, with that, which is super fun. And so basically, I've just been on this goal of like, what other sounds can I do with the sax? How far can I go? How interesting can I make it? Because it's not just about gimmicks of like, oh, what's kind of a silly sound I can do, but I'm trying to actually make music with this. And I do concerts. I don't know if any of you seen me do a live show, but I can do up to 90 minutes of solo saxophone. And I really care about putting myself in the audience shoes and thinking about taking the audience on a ride, showing them surprises kind of one at a time, and kind of interacting with them. And so it's just been a wild journey. I would love to say it's only been fun, but there's been lots of freak out moments, lots of frustration anytime you're trying to do something creative, where a lot of times these sounds don't work. For instance, I spent a long time when I was this is an example of where most ideas don't work out. I spent a couple months when I realized I could get a sound breathing in on the saxophone. I'm not talking about circular breathing. That's a technique I use a little bit. I'm talking about like while I'm breathing in air, sucking in air, making a sound while sucking in air through the reed. I could get a sound. I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to change saxophone forever. And I worked on it for a few months. This is what it sounds like. Hold on. What do you think? Is that pretty amazing? Is that going to change the saxophone world forever? No, it's gross. Oh my gosh. Okay. But, so that was a disaster, and shows just how a lot of ideas I come up with are just junk. But a lot of the ideas also, you can turn lemons into lemonade. And so I realized, that sound, especially when I do a certain low fingering, I could kind of get this like record scratching sound. Just like I tried to work on my double tonguing where I'm going taka 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 ta, front of the tongue, back of the tongue. It's a way a lot of horn players learn to tongue really fast. And trying to play up higher, it's a little bit tougher to get really consistent tones. Or in altissimo. It's like, it kind of sounds like a duck, kind of quacky. And then I realized, you know what? It kind of sounds like a record scratch too. So I'm just sloppily double-tonguing altissimo or my overtones, and that gets that kind of record scratching thing. By the way, if you are curious in some of these other techniques I use, like triple tonguing, circular breathing, I do have some of them are on YouTube, but mostly they have migrated to my website, DerekBrownSax.com. The subscription service that I have $5 a month. It's called Backstage Pass, and I have all those videos. It's like 60 YouTube videos and some other stuff on there where I go over all those techniques. I have another question here I'm going to read, and then I promise, sax players, we're going to do some stuff together. So get out your horns right now while I read this question. This comes from Music Man Can Rock. Nice name. Derek, I'm a pianist, bassist, and drummer already, and had some beginner lessons almost 30 years ago. Your cool playing techniques really inspire me to get back into learning the saxophone. Oh, awesome. That wasn't even a question. That was just a comment. Cool. Well, thank you. Yeah, and just know it's not super easy what I'm doing, but some of these things I'm going to talk about, you can do pretty easily. But yeah, just have fun making as beautiful melodies as you can and slowly see if you can incorporate some of these techniques and you can have a lot of fun. I've actually been doing that on the cello, like doing some chopping stuff. And like, even though I'm just getting started, no one says you can't experiment with that stuff early. You don't have to be a 30-year veteran to do this stuff, which is cool. Some people think it's bad because it's like, they're not all there as a musician. But it's at the same time, hopefully you're still working on good tone production. Hopefully you're still doing long tones and you're still doing, your scales and whatnot. But at the same time, try to learn how to slap tongue. Try to learn how to do these pops. Just like, even if you're just beginning out, experiment with improvisation. That's like one of the best ways to be creative as a musician. Even if it's not your goal, you never know what it's going to inspire coming up with, playing, whether that be writing or whatnot. But it's never too early to start that stuff, or never too late. I mean, I'm hopefully that's true. Starting cello when I'm 37, maybe I'll never be a pro at it, but I'm having fun with it already. So there we go. Okay. Those of you who are sax players out there, and even if you're not a sax player, you could do this on any instrument. You can kind of find an alternate technique that makes this work. We're going to do this in the last 10 minutes. Sorry, I said second half. This is going to be the last 10 minutes due to time, but thank you guys for watching and participating, and I'll try to kind of cram through some of this stuff. So here's what I suggest. Take a very simple percussive sound that you can get on your instrument. If you're a guitarist, just like palm mute the strings, just get a percussive sound. You could actually hit an instrument on a piano. You could tap something. Do a tone cluster on saxophone. You could do that with multiphonics as like a percussive sound. Flute, you could just go pa, just sing it out. On sax, we're going to do, one way I start is the simplest sound you can get on the sax, which isn't even making notes. It's just getting air. And what I'm doing here is I'm dropping my jaw, letting kind of half the air go out of the horn, half the air go in the mouthpiece. And that's what happens if you play too loud or you don't let enough air release. And that's no problem. Just do it a little softer, or really try to drop your jaw, which seems weird. It is weird. It is wrong, but not when you're trying to do this. I'm kind of thinking of it like a little cymbal sound. And so as soon as you get some sound, work on doing it with a metronome. Just work on doing it rhythmically. But as soon as you can, try to make music out of it and try to connect it to stuff you already know how to do. That's a key thing with learning anything new and actually using it, not just isolating that technique. That's important to do to get a good sound. But as soon as you can, start incorporating it into actual music. So for me, let's do this with a scale. I'm going to do my concert B flat scale, and I'm just going to play a note, and then I'll do that little, I call it an air puff. Of course, do it with different scales. Do the whole range of your horn, up and down, major, minor, different keys, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Now, let's make it, actually, let's do something else. Now, that was kind of like a melody in percussion. We're going to do bass in percussion. So I'm going to do a low note on my horn. Whatever instrument you play, do a low note and then that puff. So I'm going to do a low B flat. Okay, it's a little bit of a drum and beat thing. Congratulations, everyone. You've learned how to BEATBoX SAX. My work here's done. Now, let's make it a little bit cooler. So now let's make it two notes in the bass. I'm going to go concert B flat and concert A flat. For tenor players, C and a B flat. Okay, it's getting a little cooler. Let's make it a little bit cooler. We're going to repeat one of the notes. And this is where I would say, man, before you go too far down the road of trying to do this all one person, get with another musician and just make up a little groove. One person plays the rhythm section, one person does the improvising or scales or whatever. And once again, you don't have to be a jazz musician to improvise, but just have fun with that. Think of yourself outside the box. You now are a rhythm section instrument. Just playing a horn, it's like you're the rhythm section. You're doing a bass and percussion. It is really simple, but it was something. Now let's just gradually make it a little bit cooler. So instead of that puff sound, let's do that pop sound. Pop. Once again, this sounds like open slap. That's an open slap. This is a pop. Kind of sounds similar, and I'm just doing it on my open C sharp fingering. This is where, once again, instrumentalists, you could find a different way of doing this, whether it's striking your instrument or like trumpet players. I've heard something similar where I'm going, doing like a pa, kind of similar to doing that on the mouthpiece, which I know isn't really good for you to do, but you can do that kind of with your tongue. I've heard all types of wind instruments do this. On the sax, all I'm going to do is, everybody can just do this right now, just go pa, pa, pa. And notice, like right before you do it, before you release, you kind of build up air. You close down tight on your lips, build up air behind, and then notice your jaw drops to kind of like flies open. That's what we're going to do on the sax. We're going to have our normal embouchure, but we're going to bite down extra hard so the reed is completely closed off. So as hard as you blow, it's not going to go through the reed. And then keeping your teeth on the mouthpiece, the top of the embouchure is the same. You're going to suddenly release, drop your jaw just as hard and as fast as you can, and just let that air release. And a key thing is when you do that, don't let the air stop right away. Otherwise, you'll get this. You'll barely get a sound. You have to keep the reed engaged while you're dropping the jaw. While you're dropping the jaw, you're still blowing as hard as you can. It gets that reed to vibrate, but the tone splits. And it should sound like this. Pretty pitchless. Now, if that's a little bit tough, try this. Play a note, crescendo as loud as you can, and then drop your jaw as far as you can. And you're gonna have to exaggerate that as you get better at it. You won't have to as much, but. And watch what happens as I go shorter and shorter, and just focus on that last split second when I'm dropping my jaw. And then I just add a little bite before, and there it is. And once again, you're kind of blowing extra hard through it. You have a percussive sound. Now, once again, let's incorporate some music into this. Do the same thing we did with the puffs. Let's play a low B flat, and then alternate it with those pops. Or. Now, how do you get from that to something like this? And all the various things that I do. How do you get to that level? That seems like next level, right? Well, it's finding what are other percussive sounds I can do on the instrument. Well, like multiphonics. And those record scratch things, different pop, there's the sky's the limit. There's a bunch of different things you can do on the saxophone. And so start alternating those and make up your own beats. Take it slowly, work one at a time. And now, what about adding melody and bass line? I wish I had more time with this. I'm sorry that I talked so much at the beginning. But just like we did with the percussion, try thinking of your melodic instrument as two instruments, as like a piano player doing a low note and a high note. And try this, like, let's just do a low B flat, and we're going to do a middle B flat, and we're going to do a middle B flat scale in between. It's easier to hear it, what I mean. It's kind of like there's a drone in the bottom and then a scale in the top. You could do the opposite. Drone in the top, scale in the bottom. You can gradually increase the challenge. How about we have two notes that alter in the top and a scale in the bottom? And so forth. Once again, it's kind of like there's a right-hand part and then a left-hand part. What if we flip that? Let's do a two-note thing in the bass. I'll do like the one in the flat 7 and then scale in the top. It's like I have two saxophones playing, except they're just alternating. That does not come easy to me. I still mess up all the time doing that. It just took practicing. Do it super slow, writing out these ideas, writing out on a whiteboard what I'm going to work on today, what scale, what kind of rhythm, what the bottom part's going to be doing, what the top's going to be doing. Then you gradually add in like the percussion. So now I'm going to play like a low B flat, high B flat, pop, high B flat, and then low B flat. So. So there's bass, higher harmony or melody, percussion. There's the three. And then you work on making that more challenging. So I'm going to do low notes going up by scale. Or the reverse. then start to improvise. Add some ring, stomp while you do it. The sky's the limit. That's how you go from just, one bass, one melody, percussion, to something more. You can do 16th notes in between. You can do triplets in between. Hopefully you can kind of see where that's going, and then you just have to take the time to practice it and have fun with it, and have fun with just noticing yourself getting better, or playing something that sounds cool and like sounds like maybe a saxophone wouldn't normally sound. I wish I had way more time to go over that. I'm sorry if that went pretty fast. But hopefully it made sense where you could kind of break down each of those steps is like, you could do that for like a couple of years. I'm still working on that stuff. Don't be afraid to write stuff yourself, experiment, come up with your own exercises. Lee Post has another question. How often do you have your instrument regulated to play so easily down low? Pad changes. Here is a secret, Lee, because even if my pads aren't totally sealed, and I've done a couple of tours where I was in Russia for a month straight, and I did not go to a store to have it repaired. And I've gone to the dark side. I'm banging the sax on the stage. I'm doing different things, jamming down on these things, and maybe I need a screwdriver for something. But like by the end, those pads are leaky. The truth is, man, slap tonguing takes you so far on the saxophone. If there's a clarinet player out there, I see I'm almost out of time, so this will be my last question. Clarinet players will realize, man, it's really easy to play low and soft. On saxophone, it's usually like, it's just kind of a weird thing about the instrument, unless you slap tongue. There's something about the slap tonguing that you get that suction on that reed, and dong, it just gets that reed vibrating perfectly. And you can do those leaps. Slap tonguing. I slap tongue all the time. I wish it was an easier technique, but that's what I do. That being said, I do get some of my pads changed, usually a few of them every year or so, but not the whole thing. I just don't have money for that. So, anyways, that's hopefully an answer to the question. Hey, I am out of time right now. I really want to thank Long and McQuaid Musical Instruments for having me on here. I've heard great things about this store, this retailer, so definitely check with them first with your instruments. They have great stuff. Hopefully, I can come up and play in a store someday soon. And I love Canada, by the way. I know they're Canada-based, but so is Leger Reeds, and I want to say a special thanks to them for kind of sponsoring part of this. Once again, check out these reeds. Their signature series are awesome. They also released the American cut, which has a little bit more edge brightness if you want that for like kind of a jazz sound. Excellent reeds all around. Once again, I play on a Leger 2. I actually moved to a 2 1/4 now, but that's because I play with a weird embouchure. I'm usually at a 2 1/2. And then also a big thanks to BG France. They make awesome gear all around for the saxophone, like cleaning supplies, neck straps, and whatnot. I love this Duo series ligature. I've been playing on this for many years now, and there's just no reason to change. It just works on whatever mouthpiece I need. And it great support. Works awesome in tandem with the Leger reed. I use it on my Barry as well. So thank you to those companies. Do check out BG France and Leger, as well as Long and McQuaid stuff. Thank you guys again for joining me. Open invite to come up here once travel is cool again. Can't wait to have you here live. Yes. Whoever said that, if that was Adam, awesome. I'll make a plan. Let's put it on the calendar. I got my first vaccine. I get the next one in a couple of weeks. So stay healthy and safe, everybody. We can end this thing. We can have live music again. Stay with it. I'm talking to my phone. I should be talking right here. Stay with it. It is tough. I am struggling here, like I know so many of you are. It's a great time to get better at your craft, though, with your instrument, and support your local stores. It's really important that we have these music stores like Long and McQuaid, so I'm so thankful for what they're doing. Support each other with music. Thank you for checking out online stuff. Best of luck to you guys learning your instrument. Be creative, take risks, listen to different stuff, stay healthy, keep it fun, keep it challenging, and I hope to see some of you guys live. Check out my DerekBrownSax.com website. I've got some new albums, one with Jeff Coffin, a new big band album where I play with arrangements that I wrote with a big band, the Holland Concert Jazz Orchestra. I'm going to stop talking. I got to go check on my kids upstairs. But thank you again, and